Greetings and God bless. Welcome to another episode of Pastor Mike, Dynamic Voices for a Diverse Church, powered by The Witness, a Black Christian collective. I'm your host, G. Tyler Burns. You can follow me on Instagram at G. Tyler Burns. Please follow at your own risk. And joining me, as always, is the founder of The Witness, very extensive bio, the man, the myth, the legend, the best-selling author, Mr. Blue Check Verified himself. You can follow his writings at jamartisby.substack.com. Dr. Jamar Tisby, what's going on, bro?
What up, G? Look, people need to be reminded, if you haven't tuned in a while, this is no longer Tyler Burns.
It's
this
a slow rollout,
G.
soft launch.
Tyler Burns.
You
so
know,
make
people are
sure when
getting
you follow
acclimated.
him online at your own risk,
I'm
you're
waiting for the
looking up
copyright to
G.
come back.
Tyler Burns. Isn't
I'm
that distinguished?
I'm waiting for
Joe?
the trademark.
Isn't that distinguished? He's growing up right before our eyes. He's growing up.
I'm waiting for somebody to nominate me to be a bishop so I could be Bishop G. Tyler Burns. Because I think that's the only way it works. Pastor G. Tyler Burns just doesn't have that ring to it.
I think consider yourself nominated.
You know, so it's funny. Like, no, that's not how it works. But like, I don't want people to think that's how it works as well. So it's
Well,
like,
I can't just say
he
it.
became a bishop because he nominated himself, or Jamar nominated him. Yeah,
On the podcast.
Yeah, then they'll do that clip and stuff, and I'll end up in a Ruslan video or something. But you know what's so funny is like, you know, I was thinking about this, like this whole concept of, I forget who was saying it, but so I went by my middle name because my first name was like an older name. Sterling K. Brown.
Oh.
So he went by his middle name. And then as he got older, he kind of feels like he grew into Sterling.
Interesting.
You know?
All
So
right.
it's just,
All right.
But also because his father passed, he wanted to be closer to his father. He wanted his father's name to be spoken. You know, so I thought that was pretty
Okay,
cool.
so you grew into the initial. One day you'll grow into the whole name.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
It's an interesting
G is G.
backstory.
You know, G is G. Speaking of bishops, though.
Speaking of bishops.
Something amazing happened recently that we, of course, need to talk about because it's big Black church news. We don't do a lot of like breaking Black church news on Pass the Mic. Just so happens we're in the right season for a massive transition. So a couple of years ago, we talked about this, the transition from Bishop T.D. Jakes to his daughter, Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts. And he transitioned Woman Thou Art Loose to Woman Evolve, which is her brand. And so Woman Thou Art Loose was a huge international conference that Bishop Jakes hosted every single year, typically either in Atlanta or Dallas, where his church is, the Potter's House. And so there was that transition. And some people thought that the transition had also happened from the church, but it hadn't officially happened yet. So we just recently got word that sometime in 2025, whether it's July or later in the year, according to their website, which is
very
TBD, right?
July or sometime
later, right? This is very Black church.
Yes.
Okay, you got to understand, very Black church, which was comforting for me. I was like, Potter's House is like a huge mega church, but also just a Black church at the same time. And so they had this transition, and he announced on a Sunday in late April on the 27th that he was going to be turning the church over to her and also her husband, Pastor Touré Roberts. And we watched it. We watched the whole presentation. What did you think as someone who's an outsider of Black church? What did you think about the presentation?
I like how you just threw that in there.
Yeah,
as someone who's Black but doesn't know Black church.
No,
okay,
I'm saying
that's all right.
You know what I'm saying?
Good.
You didn't grow up in Black church, so you see the pageantry of it and all that. Like, you know what I'm saying?
As someone whose theology has been whitewashed, what did you think of the transfer?
I didn't mean it like that. Y'all know I didn't mean it like that.
That's good. That's good.
Y'all can get me in so many different things, right?
Well, no, it is actually relevant that you say that because T.D. Jakes is one of the crossover figures, right?
Yeah.
Like there's Black church famous and there's white church famous,
Yeah.
right? And almost never the twain shall meet. So there are a lot of white Christians who have no idea what's going on in the Black church.
Okay, this is an opportunity. Who is Black church famous versus like crossover church famous? Who would you say is like crossover famous? So you got Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Uh-huh.
I say Joel Osteen.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd say Stephen Furtick.
Yes, that's a prime example.
I would say, who else? Y'all can speak. Who else? Who else y'all think? Who would be like crossover church famous? Well, I mean, then there's like artists, so like CeCe Winans.
Sure.
She was just on American Idol, so of course. Kirk Franklin.
Yeah, Kirk Franklin. Quintessential
for sure. I'd say
but
somebody.
It's a handful.
Yeah, I'd say it's like a handful of people who both Black church and white church would know.
Right.
Nobody in the peanut gallery said anything, which is interesting.
Exactly.
To me. None of the PTM gallery said anything. You're like, I don't know. Yeah. John Piper, maybe no. I don't know. I think who else would that be? That's fascinating. I think somebody, ironically, most of the people probably TBN figures.
Absolutely.
Like Benny Hinn.
Absolutely.
Or
well, there's a lot of folks.
I think maybe Creflo Dollar might be.
Are you saying that folks that white
would know him?
Christians would know?
would know who he is.
Sure. Yeah.
I think probably
there's a
Creflo
lot
Dollar.
more white pastors and public figures that black folks would know.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing comes from being famous and being black famous and like in the media and entertainment industry.
So who would be somebody that would be black church famous?
G. Tyler Burns.
I guarantee you I would not be. Somebody
what
like,
about before the Target?
Joseph Walker? Yeah.
Sure.
You were thinking Jamal Bryant?
Yeah, before the Target boycott. Maybe now a few people know him. But before that,
not everybody would know who he is. Yeah. I think even maybe like a Sarah Jakes would be black church famous at this point.
Yes, that would be
a good one. And when I say black church famous, I mean like huge in the black church space.
Yes.
Like household name in the black church space.
Not a 50-50 chance you would know.
No.
A 95% chance, you know. Yes.
Definitely. And so it's fast. So anyway, I'm sorry.
The point being, TD Jakes is one of those few crossover figures, and you could make the argument, a strong argument, that he would be the biggest biggest, most well-known pastor of a generation.
Yeah, I think it would probably be between him and Rick Warren.
Yeah, I'm saying black.
Oh, in black church? Absolutely, 1,000%. I think overall, like even... Because wasn't it Time magazine that said he was America's pastor? I think it was like mid '90s or something like that, or like
because I know they did that for Rick Warren. They do it for the white pastors.
I think one time they had said he was America's pastor, and I feel like I was like, whoa, that's the first time. It's like, whoa, TD Jakes is a thing,
right? So he's got that. So he's so prominent that even white people know him. Is my only point, right? And it's pageantry when we look at it's a big deal. So as he said in the video where he sort of passed the torch, he's been in this ministry for 48 years.
That's wild to think about.
40, almost half a century.
Kind of haunts me if I'm being honest with you.
How so?
I'm scared. I don't want to be doing anything for 48 years.
I mean,
other than being married. Like, that's pretty much it, bro. Like, yikes.
Now, granted, he's done a lot, right? He's not just preaching. He's not just pastoring a local congregation. He's built a multifaceted ministry with all kinds of expressions, from book writing to conferences to community action, movies, or all of it, right? So but 48 years in ministry, period.
That's a long time. That's a long time.
So the first thing that struck me was the emotion of it. This wasn't an affected, show. You could tell it was real there. The other thing that struck me, it was deliberate. This wasn't something that he woke up one night and said, the Spirit spoke to me and this is the next person.
That's typically how it is.
There's precedent.
Ask me how I know.
So there was a deliberateness in this. There was an intentionality in introducing these folks to the church, getting them involved in the ministry, having an on-ramp.
Yeah, for years.
Yeah, for years. Because you don't transfer after 48 years just to anybody in a day, right? So that's my initial impression. There's other deeper levels that we'll get to.
I think it was fascinating how he framed this for the church, because one of the challenges of being a founder is you not only name your successor, but you also set your successor up for success. And so I think the way in which he framed everything was fascinating for me, because Sarah's story is incredible. Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts, if you don't know her story, has an incredible testimony of being pregnant at a very young age, I believe 12 or 13, and all that did within the context of the church, and how she has gone from that and the trauma of all of that to now running the church is truly, truly not just inspirational, but it is a transformative supernatural testimony. Now, anybody could say, oh, well, he's powerful. He's Bishop Jakes. Like, he can make certain things happen. But if you're not good enough to capture the attention of the people and for people to respect you and follow you, you're not going to be in that role. You're just not going to be successful enough to be in that role. You're not going to prove that you've got what it takes to embody that role. So yes, I'm sure she got tremendous opportunities and platforms and was given every chance and opportunity that she could, but she took advantage of it. And she's grabbed it by the horns and done a phenomenal job, not just there, but also with their church in LA. So that was a proving ground, training ground for them. And that grew and expanded so much so to the point to where now they're able to manage it from afar and also in person. I mean, just tremendous leadership capacity. So to see that full circle moment, I can't imagine what she was feeling, thinking. And yes, they've known this was coming, but that overwhelming weight. He also says something very interesting, which I can attest to. He says, at a certain point, you'll probably feel the weight transfer over to you. And I know you're probably feeling it right now. And then I love how he actually validated the fear in front of people.
Yeah, T.D. Jakes talking to them.
He's talking to them. He said, I know you're feeling scared. I know you're probably scared. I know you're probably nervous. I know you're probably like wondering what is going to happen. It's okay. And I think hearing that for people so that, again, they don't think that their pastors are like superhumans or don't have emotions or don't have feelings. They aren't real people. They don't feel pain. They don't feel fear. It was good for him to affirm in front of the people with his back turned to the people, which I think was very intentional, almost as if they were eavesdropping in on a conversation. I know you're afraid. I know you're probably nervous. It's okay.
Acknowledging the gravity of the moment.
Is this a weight?
Yes.
It's huge.
Yes.
How do you feel like, what do you think? How do you think people are going to respond to this? Because the reactions are still fresh because we're recording this pretty quickly after it happened. So how do you feel like people are going to respond and embrace, especially not just handing it over to a child, but a daughter?
So one of the things that I'm glad that they mentioned was this is not going to be T.D. Jakes 2.0.
Yeah.
There's not going to be another T.D. Jakes. So don't expect them to lead or pastor in the same exact way that the founder did and the guy who's been there for literally dozens of years. I think that's probably going to be the steepest learning curve for the congregation is as T.D. Jakes moves off the scene from the day to day, actually having different leadership that leads differently.
Yes.
That's what's going to be, oh, well, this is not how we used to do it. This is not how we've always done it, kind of a thing. I think that'll be part of it. I think
that phrase is where black churches go to die.
Yes. But I wonder if
we've always done it this way. Okay, sure.
Having his daughter in that role, having her husband and both of them being there in a presence, I wonder if that's not a celebration. Yeah. Not a sense of, oh, well, we didn't vet enough candidates and this is just pastor showing favoritism to his children. I don't get that vibe yet.
No, not yet. And I don't think that'll actually ultimately be the vibe because they've done a tremendous job of establishing and building credibility over the past 5 years. And if you see them at an international leadership conference, which I've been to many times, you'll see that they're involved and entrenched in what happens. And they're given adequate platform to introduce themselves to the people. And they've been inside the church, which who knows? I mean, the layers and levels and web.
Yeah, there, what we can't see on a YouTube video. Yeah.
But I think, I'm also considering that this is a significant moment for someone like Sarah. And I'm positing it like Pastor Sarah is taking this over because that's how it feels. But I know they're kind of leading together.
Yeah.
Which is maybe one of the very interesting things about church, right? Like, I think sometimes it's okay to have a leader and someone who's the spouse supporting, but kind of presenting the lead couple together can sometimes, especially if they're both in ministry, can sometimes create confusion.
Who's being
rather than clarity?
Commissioned as the
Right.
pastoral
So what's the commissioning
leader
role? Yeah.
Yes.
So even in my egalitarian mutuality, like I think sometimes it can be very entrenched and confusing if both pastors as a married couple are seen as leads.
Is Mylena considered a co-pastor?
No, she's our worship pastor.
Okay.
But
which is a
it's
specific
natural.
role.
It's natural that people see her as lead pastor, but I don't think they would see her as that. Right. I don't think she would see herself as that. She would see herself more as worship pastor. And we leave the church together, but not in the same role. You know, I think it's been helpful for her.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't crush her.
Yes.
But I think it's also been helpful for the people as well.
Because there's a spiritual sense of God calling particular people to pastor, shepherd, lead a particular flock.
Yes.
That may be a joint calling, but probably there's an individual.
You definitely do it together.
Absolutely.
But the role and responsibility, the weight.
Yeah, who's at the elders meeting?
Yeah.
Who has that
Who
responsibility?
has ultimate decision power? Who gets held accountable if something goes off?
That's what I'm talking about.
Like, what's the responsibility?
Yes.
Absolutely. 1000%. And so I think that's why I'm positing it that way, but it's not to disrespect him. I'm just positing it that way.
So you think it's Sarah Jakes
absolutely,
in
without
that
a doubt.
role?
Yeah, I 100% believe that. And maybe they'll prove us wrong. But if that is the case, I think it's very striking because if I'm not mistaken, she's in her mid-30s. I think we're close to, if not the same age.
Wow.
So if you consider that, I mean, you're considering this is a huge moment.
It's really young for such a massive ministry.
And very young.
Yeah. Now, what was interesting to me is her husband, Touré Roberts, spoke first.
That was interesting. Yeah.
Because, again, as an outsider, as you've so eloquently reminded me, looking in, I would have assumed that the first person who speaks after T.D. Jakes says his part, after he's passing the torch, the first person who speaks would be the lead person.
They may have a totally different philosophy than I do. I've just seen that I have grown to appreciate but also dislike the pastor couple, power couple image.
Okay. Unpack that.
And I think it is crushing for the person who's not at the helm. And I think it can work, but if there are only clear boundaries and I'd never want it to be confusing for the people. I just never want it to be. And it's less about power and like jockeying for position.
Yeah.
It's more about organizational leadership. Clarity.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's crucial in spiritual authority. So that's a whole other tangent, but
well, I think it's a perfect time to shout out our mutual friend, Beth Allison Barr, who has written a book, Becoming the Pastor's Wife. New York Times bestseller. But Dr. Barr is a professor of history at Baylor University. She's a medievalist, which brings a really interesting perspective. And basically, in her first book, The Making of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, she's talking about how from at least the medieval times on up, you had women in formal leadership roles
1,000%.
in the church and in all various kind of ministries, and how this biblical manhood and womanhood in the evangelical construct is a novelty in this broad scope of church history. That's her first book. Her second book, Becoming the Pastor's Wife, is about the evolution of this semi-formal, informal ministry role called pastor's wife, which she's arguing had to become a thing because women, and this is mainly in the white evangelical church, were excluded from formal leadership roles, but they still had leadership responsibilities. And so the pastor's wife becomes this model, this paradigm, this very constrictive model of how women in the church are sanctioned to lead by some. So that's just a really worthwhile book. Yes.
Can't wait to read that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And I think that, I know she's speaking from context of white church, white evangelical church, but happens in black churches too all the time.
Yeah. Well, she actually has a really interesting section in there about the church mother. and the way these roles sort of evolve differently in Black churches and white churches. And what she essentially does is say that even within the restrictive sort of patriarchal that's happening in both Black and white churches, the church mother is a sort of different role.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I need to read that.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Okay, but let's take a break and then we'll come back and get into a little bit more, and maybe we'll speculate. Well, greetings and God bless, family. This is your host of Pastor Mike, Tyler Burns, and I am so excited that we're still doing Pastor Mike 11 years after we started. Think about this. 11 years after we started, we're still doing this. And the reason why we can do it is because people like you have supported us from the beginning. We would not still be here if not for the support of people who are our patrons. And if you go to patreon.com/Pastor Mike, if this podcast has helped you in any way, shape, or form, if we've encouraged you to think more deeply about race and justice, if we've inspired you to make change right where you are, if we've been an oasis in the desert in the midst of toxic church spaces, we need your help. We need your support. For just a few dollars every single month, you can keep us going. You literally, as our listeners, keep us going. So head to patreon.com/Pastor Mike. We're passing the mic to you for your support so that we can continue doing this podcast that so many people love. Thank you so much for your support. If you are already a patron, and if you're not, just a few dollars a month. Thank you so much. So we are back talking about the transition from Bishop T.D. Jakes to his daughter and son-in-law, Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts and Pastor Touré Roberts. We were talking about how young she is. I can't imagine where Potter's House is going to go. Some of the guys were asking, do you want to speculate about where it's going to go and what's going to happen with Potter's House? I think from what she said and what their heart is, I think there's going to be the return of, which is something that Bishop Jakes did, but never fully went where it should have gone. I think there's going to be the significant return of multiple locations in different cities. Different expressions of the Potter's House. I think one of the things I can tell about Pastor Sarah is, and their type of leadership, is that it's far more agile. And doing ministry in the Bible Belt and then also doing ministry in a place like LA gives you some tremendous agility and the ability to have a broader horizon of seeing what ministry can be. So I think they're gonna pretty quickly give you different locations. I feel like it's gonna be the ministry is going to become younger pretty quickly. It wouldn't shock me if the church median age drops by at least 5 years, maybe a little bit further over time. But I don't think they're going to get in the reins and like turn the wheel left. But I can tell it's going to get younger. It's probably going to be, even though Bishop Jakes has done a really good job, I think, of platforming women in the church, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think also you'll see those multiple locations. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think Potter's House will be something different. I think Potter's House may start to feel a little bit more like Transformation Church.
I knew you were going to say that. Yes, absolutely.
And not with that level of energy and creativity, because I think, Pastor Mike Tyler is a different type of leader. But I do think it'll start to feel a little bit more like that. In its energy. I think you'll feel a little LA and Dallas,
I think one of the challenges pastors Sarah and Touré would have is navigating that tension a little bit, right? In the sense of they are stepping into a church that probably has a median age a bit older than they are, that's probably ready for certain things and not ready for others.
Yeah.
But even beyond whatever pressures the congregation itself puts on them, I think out of respect for Pastor T.D. Jakes and what he's built, they're going to want to move a certain way that maybe is not natural to their leadership style.
I don't know how it's even going to feel to have him. He says he's going to be around. I think they said he's going to be chairman of the board or something of that nature. I just don't. I think that's a great move for him, cements what they do, encourages their leadership, and I don't know how it is to let something go that you can say.
I mean,
let something go that you started.
To his credit, he's letting it go now. In this, and I say to his credit, because this is the way you want it to transition.
Yes.
You don't want it to be because of a sudden illness or death. You don't want it to be because that they haven't planned around, right? You don't want it to be because of some scandal, which has happened so many times, all too often.
And both could have been this case for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, both. In recent months.
Easily. And I think he's probably sensing that.
Yeah.
Like I gotta set this up now because the future is quite uncertain for him as an individual. But it will be certainly a challenge for new leadership to come in and with a track record of being able to plant and grow a church, which they've already done. So they're going to want to take those lessons and that wisdom and apply it here, but it's not a blank slate here. It's got a half century of a particular leader's style and ethos.
Well, let's do this. If you were on their council, what would you encourage them to do?
Be them.
Yeah.
And you got it. There's always going to be the uphill implementation with people who knew the old ways and now are need. But there's no other way to lead authentically than to be yourself. And you'll lose some people.
Oh,
That's
this
okay.
is like 1,000. So the first thing I would say is, is the one thing that one of my friends, Pastor Armour Stevenson in KC, when I took over the church, I emailed him. So, bro, I don't know what I'm doing. And I took over the church in crisis. And one of the things they said to me that still rings in my ears to this day, years later, is be more concerned with who you can reach than who you can keep. That was transformative advice. Be more concerned with who you can reach than who you can keep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he said, I need you to settle right now. You're going to lose a lot of people. Settle it right now in your heart. And I was like, nah, but if I talk to him and I do this and I do that, I was trying to justify it in my mind, but he was right. Lost a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that one singular phrase of advice kept me. It's about who we can reach. And according to what is prevailing church wisdom, you'll typically reach people who are 10 years old or 10 years younger. That's your sweet spot. And anything else is gravy.
Yeah.
And you got to build in staff around it. But if they're following you, typically going to be people 10 years older, 10 years younger. And so I had to come to grips with it. And I think that's one thing I would say is they will lose people. It doesn't matter how awesome of leaders you are.
Yeah.
For some people, I'll never be their pastor.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll never be certain people in that church as pastors. But it underscores this reality that transition is necessary. I've watched a number of the transition services in the past year or two. And the joke I always tell my dad is, man, I can't wait to do that. Like, I'm serious. I cannot wait. Like, people know, and I'll just keep it general so you don't get the sauce, but people know I want to turn the church over to somebody else far sooner than later. I can't wait to transition. Can't wait to put younger leaders in there. And
Why is that?
What'd you say?
Why is that?
At 36, I think we stay in positions too long. We coalesce power too long. And we miss moments because we feel like we're the person. And I don't feel like the Lord gave me a call to 50 years at Rise City Church. I hope so. But if not, it's cool. I hope I can be a part of it, but I do not feel called to be the leader for that many more years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I actually feel like the next person will have a greater grasp, leadership capacity I don't have, a greater grasp on how to take the church beyond caps, a greater grasp to lead certain teams better than I can. And frankly, I feel like there's more for me to do outside of a church. And that reason plus the reason of I want my kids to experience life outside of just being pastors' kids. And I want my wife not to feel the pressure to be a pastor's wife or lead pastor / worship pastor / whatever. So I would love for them to experience that freedom and just be able to enjoy Sunday again so they don't hate church and hate God because they hate church.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm eager.
Yeah.
I'm eager. I'm excited. Can't wait to do it when I'm young. Have people scratching their heads like, what are you doing? I think the motto is quicker transition. They say whenever you get into a role, you're supposed to be looking for your successor automatically.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that for the past 3-4 years. Like after I said, oh, okay, people are still gonna come to church. All right, cool. Let me find somebody else who can eventually take this thing on, or at least be inspired by the vision of it. You know,
They might be at your church right now. You never know.
oh no, I like have a short list. I've talked with some of them, everything. Like I'm dead serious. They're not at the church right now, I don't think. But
Well, from Bishop T.D. Jakes to Bishop G. Tyler Burns, you got to move differently.
bro, I would love to. I think pastors need to actually embrace the freedom of not being professional Christians. And I say this as someone who has always been bivocational. So I've always had other things that I do outside of church. But man, I don't feel defined by the role. I love what I do. It's not because I'm looking for a way out. I love what I do. Love the people. Love walking with them through life. Love the messy pastor stuff. Love that. I'm not defined by the role. I feel like God can move in so many different ways in my life. God can move. And I feel like the church, especially young people, need to be trained out of pastoral idolatry. And the only way you do it is you model it. And so they need to see healthy leadership across group. But then they also need to see, hey, I appreciate what God did. But hey, God moves in PT's life, and then he laid it down. And then the next person came and they took it and they went up, but we didn't idolize them because we recognized they might not be our pastor forever. We'll love them, respect them, care for them, honor them, follow them. But then at the end of the day, when it's their time, when their time's up, their time's up.
And people are multifaceted, capable of a lot of different things. T.D. Jakes said he's going to continue to invest his time in community building, in nonprofit work.
Absolutely.
You know, so he's not done. And as a matter of fact, you could see a little spark of joy and enthusiasm and excitement as he talked about that.
Bro, the weight of pastoring is murderous. People have no idea. Like, if you've never been in that role and you know what this is like, if you've never been in the role of like being responsible for any flock, you have no idea the weight, that like the pain, the heaviness, the difficulty. And so it's a joy to think about. No, it's not you're no longer responsible for people. It's just out of that role, there's new vistas for you to see and accomplish. Man, I want to get my PhD in sacred rhetoric and black preaching. You know, I want to do fun stuff. Like I want to write books for real. Like I want to be and have something to say, right? Not just writing a book to fulfill a contract. Like I just want to write a book that's helpful for people. You know, I love this. I think it was yesterday I told some of the people who know the heart behind what I've said. I was like, man, I'd love to have a cabin for pastors to get away. Of course.
Absolutely.
Hey, you chop some wood. We're going to make some great food for you. And 3-4 months out of the year, we run this cabin and we're just going to let your soul rest. And you spend here a week at a time and you can recharge. Then no expectations. I'm not going to talk your ear off. I just want to host a space. You know, I love that. You know, that sounds like fun to me. You know, I'd love to go do something with you. You know, I don't know, man. You know,
we should host a podcast.
Yeah. Mike the Pass, you know. But nah, I feel like there's so much more to life than where you're at right now. And I wish more pastors, I hope this starts the wave of more pastors letting stuff go.
Yeah.
And it is not the first time it's happened, but this is certainly one of the most prominent.
And maybe that public passing of the torch is permission for some pastors who feel like this season is coming to a close to be free.
Yeah.
And to pass it on without a sense of guilt, without a sense of, oh, I'm abandoning people. No. Life works in seasons. And maybe this is your season to allow another person to enter into the pastoral ministry season and allow yourself to enter into the next thing that God has for you.
I remember, last thing I'll say is I remember watching the video of Bishop Jakes having the medical episode a few months back, which we later learned was a massive heart attack in the pulpit and him kind of tipping over. And what was interesting was That's Bishop Jakes, who's founded this place, lived in the place, blood, sweat, and tears in the place, would die for the place. I looked at him and he was tipping over and nobody was moving. And it was a striking symbolism that he's leaning over. We didn't know it at the time, having a massive heart attack, and nobody is moving. They were going to watch him pass out.
Mm.
And then eventually, because he barely was able to hold himself up, people gathered and surrounded him. But it reminded me of this quote in that moment. Jesus died for the church. And because Jesus died for the church, you don't have to. And I think about how many people have literally died in the pulpit. Died because they couldn't pass it off. Died because they thought that was the only thing God had for them. Chances are it's not. Chances are the role you're in right now, you'll not have forever. Whether that's inside the church, outside the church, embrace letting it go. Free advice. You didn't ask for it.
Move different.
Move different. Hey, what do you think? What did you put in the comments? We're on YouTube, of course, Pastor Mike Podcast. We're also wherever podcasts are played. You can subscribe to us. We really, really appreciate your support. Leave us a review. Also support us via Patreon, patreon.com/PassTheMic. As always, Jamar, thank you for joining me. I don't even thank you for joining me, man.
Well, thank you for joining me.
We'll see you soon on the next
Pass the Mic.